Hello, Jack from Amsterdam.
Good morning. Jeffrey Scott here from Denver with Green Village Biofertilizers. Thank you for doing this. This is incredible. Always
Good.
Anything that Common Lands and Forward has to do, I'm in.
That's how we like it. I love it. Looking forward to engaging with you. Tove, welcome. Great. I saw Astrid as well dropping in. Welcome.
Okay, I think we're almost ready to start. Just waiting for the last people to drop in. People are still going to be dropping in for some time. We're going to slowly get started. Welcome again, everyone. Very warm welcome on behalf of Common Land. My name is Peter Ploeg, and Willemijn and I will be hosting this session with you today, as well as some other colleagues. We have a great team in the background. We're very excited to get started. For those that joined early, we were listening to soundscapes, and the link to the soundscapes will pop up in the chat soon. It's a beautiful collection of sounds from the territory of Albaydah. So if you want to hear more of that, just find the link in the chat. But we're going to slowly get started. Again, welcome everyone. Make sure that we see your right name so we know who you are. We'd love to be fully transparent. This is a Zoom meeting, not a webinar. So we will all be able to see each other and we're going to interact with one another. That's all going to be very exciting. So do turn your videos on and we look forward to interacting with you later. We're just sharing with you a little bit of the outline. And as an introduction, if you're new to Common Land, we are on a mission, as you can see in this slide, to transform 100 million hectares of degraded landscapes. We definitely don't do this alone. We do this with many partners around the world. And we use the forward returns framework to bring back a return of natural capital, social capital, financial capital, and also a return of inspiration, which is what this session today is very much about. Since we've started, we are aligning stakeholders in large landscapes to all work together. And at the moment, we're active in various countries and boldly scaling up and scaling across to work with many more in what is now the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. So ahead of us is a very exciting time. We are all aware of the urgency of our time and the need for restoration. And we're all here to inspire one another about the change and action that can happen and the role of inspiration in that. Willemijn?
Yes.
Over to you.
All right. We'll talk a bit about the Zoom survival tips. Am I correct? All right, let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So I know you've all spent quite considerable amounts of time on Zoom, I'm assuming, but just some survival tips to help you get through the session, and we'll guide you through it. But it's always nice to find a nice and quiet space for yourself where you can immerse yourself in what we're about to go through together today. It's great to add your name, location, and organization if possible in your name tag so people can immediately see where you're from or whom you're working with. It's nice if you can go on mute if you're not speaking so that we can really attentively listen to the speaker. And of course, raise your hand if you want to say something. Then we can make sure that you get your turn, and we will have a plenary as well. So it's really useful if you can raise your hand. You can do that by clicking on participants. And then you should be able to see a button where it says raise hand. So of course, when it's your turn to talk, great if you can unmute, because then we can hear you. Considering we're not doing a webinar with just looking at the speakers, we get a chance to see everyone. So great if you can turn on your camera if you have one, because then we can see each other almost like we're in real life. So take these to heart, and I hope they're useful. Next up is the you, Peter. Yeah, over to you again.
Great. Yeah. So what are we doing for the next 90 minutes? Willemijn and I are welcoming you, and soon we'll hand over to our colleague Erika, who will help us set the scene together with Judith Schwartz and Precious Phiri. And once we're immersed in that scene, we'll also have a bit of a conversation with them on abundance, inspiration, and the good news. After that, we'll be interacting with one another. So we'll be asking all of you to join breakout rooms in small groups, because we'd love to hear from you what your stories are on Unbreaking news and your stories on abundance, inspiration, and good news. And then we'll all come back together to this plenary and we'll share, we'll hear some voices, just what has come up for you. We'll have a little bit of time for questions and interaction before we then move to a close. So I think we're ready to introduce the speakers. Back to you, Willemijn.
Great. So I would love to warmly welcome Precious Phiri and Judith Schwartz. They're two really fabulous women. Just to start with Judith Schwartz. Judith Schwartz is a journalist and an author. She comes from Vermont, USA, and her work really explores nature-based solutions to global environmental, economic, and social challenges. So she looks at these challenges that are so comprehensive and big and tries to make sense of them and write beautiful books about them. So one of her recent books is the Reindeer Chronicles, and other inspiring stories of working with nature to heal the earth. And that book really focuses on how grassroots movements engage in landscape restoration all over the globe. So her examples come, for example, from China, the high plateaus, the driest deserts of Saudi Arabia, the Arctic landscape of Sami territories in Norway, the humid climate of Hawaii, but also the arid landscapes of rural Spain. So we'll travel to some of these landscapes today, but it's really nice that this book transcends a sense of hope and agency, which was also the inspiration for us to organize this event. Now, a fun fact about Judith is that she has a dog, which is relatively a new dog, and the dog's called Shelby, the Snow Queen of Mount Anthony. That's how we called her. She calls the dog, and we talked about it before, so I thought it was a beautiful name for a beautiful dog. And you know, what's also nice to know about Judith, she's not just looking at stories on regeneration, she's also diving into it herself. So she did a permaculture course, so she's applying it also in her daily life, and I thought that was a nice note. And of course we have Precious Phiri. She's from Zimbabwe, and she's a facilitator and an accredited professional in holistic management, connected to the Savory Institute. She's also a steering committee member and Africa coordinator for Regeneration International. And Precious's work really involves networking, bringing communal work to global platforms, community organizing, as well as working with rural communities to learn together and reverse poverty and ecological degeneration. So she has a lot of experience in different parts of Africa together with partners, and creating opportunities for these communities to change the trajectory of their lives, both now and in the future. And we're really happy to have her here because it's a great connection to what we're trying to touch on today. Another fun fact about Precious is she loves to learn, how we as humans can dance with nature. And I hope we get a bit of a feeling for that today. And she's been working with soil since she was about 8 or 9 years old. And then she actually joined an agricultural class, boys only back then, which really launched her career also within the Savory Institute and onwards with Regeneration International and many more things she's doing. So without further ado, and I would like to welcome the speakers, and my beautiful colleague Erica will also take them through the conversation. So welcome, Erica. Erica is my colleague at Common Land, working as a landscape manager for the landscape in Spain and the Netherlands. And she's going to do a great job at facilitating. Good luck.
Thank you, Willemijn. So no pressure, but hi everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to talk today about unbreaking news, since the real news brings stories on climate disruption, the biodiversity crisis, things that are not going well. And we thought it was time for a story about positivity and changes in the long run. So we're going to focus on inspiring landscape stories, what is going well, and we want to celebrate regeneration with you. So I hope we can share a laugh and a dance together in the next hour or so. So we start with setting the scene. We will be visiting 3 landscapes in the coming 20 minutes, deep diving into restoration and inspiration. We will be visiting Africa's grasslands in Zimbabwe and Botswana, and we will travel onwards to Spain. Our first stop is Saudi Arabia. Let's start with the story of Albaydah in the desert of Mecca.
Today, this site has been transformed into a dryland savanna. We have seen wild bees return to our mountain and swarm on our site. We have seen a dramatic increase in bird, lizard, and insect populations, even walking sticks. Dozens of new acacia trees and multiple species of forbs and grasses have begun to grow anew. Nature is coming back. Our mineral and water cycles are healing. And an upward spiral of life, compounding on life, has replaced the downward spiral of desertification. The missing piece now is a sustainable grazing system to assist in the biodegradation of plant and woody material and to allow the people to restore their traditional livelihoods. This system can form the backbone of a new circular rural economy. 4 of the tree species that we trialed survived and continued to produce during our long period of drought, and these will form the backbone of future agroforestries developed in the region. This is a regenerative agriculture in the desert of Mecca, and it is a system that increases the productivity and carrying capacity of the land, that creates jobs and produces sellable goods, and at the same time reverses desertification, increases biodiversity, creates soil, sequesters carbon, increases freshwater resources, and drastically augments the land's ability to foster life.
Welcome, Judith. It's an honor to have you with us today, and congratulations with the Reindeer Chronicles. It's really an awesome journey around the globe, literally, deep diving into restoration stories, projects in New Mexico, in Hawaii, in Norway, and we were lucky you also visited Spain. And today you wanted to talk about Albaydah. We just saw a video from Albaydah showing what can be done in only as little as 8 years, where the project literally, or the location literally changes from a desert into a dryland savanna. What made you want to talk about Albaydah now?
Yeah, a few reasons. It's an extraordinary story and a really dramatic ecological story of ecological redemption. One reason is that some of the most incredible, some of the most successful projects occur in some of the most punishing, extreme landscapes. So I wanted to highlight that, because if we can make such a huge positive difference in such an extreme environment, well, then imagine what we can do in many places around the world where the degradation is not so extreme and the dry, it's not as hyper arid as that landscape. Also because it's really a grassroots effort. So the voice that you hear in that video is that of Neil Spackman, who's an American who he was a speaker of Arabic, and that got him a position in a poverty reduction project in Western Saudi Arabia to get housing and help impoverished Bedouin better their lives. And it was his idea to add an ecological component to the project. And he did a kind of fast track permaculture design, just, a whirlwind study with Jeff Lawton, who also Jeff Lawton, who famously did a Greening the Desert project in Jordan. And so they worked together and they picked a site. And yeah, so this wasn't a big NGO with a lot of funds. This wasn't a company. This wasn't a government. This was someone with an idea and his team of local Bedouins who did this work. And so what they did was they focused on collecting water, because even in a really dry place like this region, when it rains, like it overwhelms the landscape. So rather than just letting that rain go and cause the flooding and the damage that usually happens and then get back to aridity, they built little water harvesting and swales and all different earthworks to collect that water.
Can you explain what swales are?
Okay, so swales are kind of when you add contour into the landscape, so it slows the water down and directs the water into where you want the water to go. But slowing the water, I mean, we saw the stones there. That slowing the water meant that the water was held in the landscape rather than just rushing off, causing more erosion and silting up the waterways and all of the damage that floods can do. So they built these earthworks in anticipation of the rain. Then when the rain
infiltrate and that the vegetation can grow again, is that
so there would be some infiltration and some that they merely just harvested so that they could begin to irrigate and plant.
Mm-hmm.
And so they never went beyond their water budget. The water they captured was their bank of water. So that's another important point, because a lot of places rely on groundwater and then they deplete the groundwater, but they were very careful to stay within their budget. And over several years, and I'm just imagining the patience that it took to plan and then wait for the water and then plant, but never use more water than they had. So they did that for several years and they were seeing improvements. And then in 2016, the project ran out of funds and they had to stop the irrigation. Now, the extraordinary thing here is that after 2 years, with maybe, I think, like a year and a half without rain, only 0.5 millimeter of rain during that time period, they just had to let it go. They came back and saw that 80% of the trees they had planted survived. So what that shows is that they had built a self-sustaining ecological system.
And that they really restored the landscape of Albaydah.
Right. One thing that I find really interesting is how Neil describes a desert. Now, we all think that we know what a desert is, that there's some threshold of rainfall, that if it's above that, it's not a desert, and if it's below that, it is a desert. But he looks at function. He says that a desert is a place where when it rains, it floods. Meaning that when the land is able to hold on to that moisture, to hold on to the water, and it doesn't flood, that the land ceases to be a desert. And we can see that this is what's happening here. And as Neil says on the video, is that it has turned into a savanna landscape.
Wow, what a great start. Thank you, Judith. So this is a project in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. Our next speaker, Precious, suggested a video that first shows the national parks and the communal lands of Zimbabwe and Botswana under conventional management. And then halfway through the video, it's a short video, you'll hear the music changing. And it's showing a conservation area in Zimbabwe under holistic management. Let's take a look. So I think we're going to spotlight Precious, and allow me already to say, welcome Precious. You're calling in from Africa. Judith is in America. We are based as Commonland in the Netherlands. So we're not only traveling over the globe by video, but also virtually by organizing this meeting like this. It's awesome to have you with us. You have an impressive background in grassland restoration, particularly in Southern Africa, and community mobilization. And you wanted to show us this video today. So tell us, what does your work context look like? What is holistic management?
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you everyone who's joined the call. I'm so glad and really honored to be on this platform. So yes, I'm talking to you from Zimbabwe. I wanted to show you just that 1 minute long video to display the power of decision-making that embraces the complexity of each place and then applies relevant tools. So based on the video, we live in a mostly brittle and fairly dry place. I mean, mostly dry. So according to our country, we're in region 4 and 5 in the rainfall zones.
What's brittle?
Brittle is, I'll talk about it just in a bit, or maybe if you want me to address it right now so that we don't have people lagging behind. So the brittleness is a scale which shows the distribution of moisture across the year in a particular place, not necessarily the amount of rain, but the presence of moisture from January to December, like in a biological, a calendar year. So a brittle area would be in the area of 7 to 10, which means we have very precise, very short season of moisture and growth. And then the rest of the year is very dry, almost equal to no moisture. And so the growth slows down. Plants really literally dry up and you break them. But in a non-brittle environment like the Amazon forest or London, plants don't really break because you have lots of moisture over time, and decay happens continuously because of the presence of moisture and things like that. So yes, so I wanted to share it from that angle to say most of our areas here are very brittle, and holistic management has really been founded by Alan Savory of the Savory Institute, is a decision-making tool or decision-making framework that helps each person understand their place that they are regenerating or place of work, so that whatever decision that you're making is good for that environment, good for those people, and also for the economy of that place. So that is holistic management. The areas that I work in Africa, about 2/3 of our land is degraded. And I work with pastoral communities that manage vast lands through partners. because that's mostly in East Africa, mostly Kenya. That's where I have an experience in the Maasai and the Samburu tribes. And then in my own country and my own region, Southern Africa, we work with agro-pastoral. We call them that because most people refer to agriculture as cropping, but agriculture is the production of food and fiber from the world's lands and waters. But then for the clarity, we say agro-pastoral, so that you have cropping communities and they also do farming of livestock, and then they have wildlife in the mix. So these are the people that I work with. They're in the front lines of poverty, being affected by the impacts of climate change and really unstable seasons of rain and dryness. And then so for the longest time, we've had massive droughts. But what you realize is in desertifying lands, I really like that concept of desert is a matter of function, because grasslands that were thriving before are turning into deserts. So you can have those deserts that are ecologically been there, but then you have ones that are caused by our management and decisions that we carry on the land. So most of our deserts here are really due to management of how we manage the resources that we have in form of livestock or big reserves, national parks and things like that. But then the video that you just saw, it literally shows you a land adjacent to one of the best practiced conserved areas. That's national parks. They are special, set aside. But then every action, if you do not consider the complexity of the environment that you're managing, you tend to have what we call unintended consequences or unintended outcomes. So you saw the national parks, instead of them being thriving, and they are hosts of our most prized wildlife, very precious to us, but then they're desertifying in our eyes. And then you have a land holistic management, same drought areas with same little rainfall, but then you wonder, where does it rain more? But it's due to a careful choosing of tools that will then change the trajectory of the place. So that's really in brief what this is.
You say there is a desert because of function and a desert because of degradation. Can you identify which one is happening when?
No, I said I was agreeing with Judith when she spoke about desert as a matter of the function of the place. If it doesn't capture water and loses water, it is essentially a desert, even if it was a thriving grassland before. You cannot call it a grassland now. It's now turned into a desert. And so most of our lands, we watch it turning into deserts because of how we manage usually livestock.
Okay, thank you, Precious. I believe you had another slide. Do you want to share something on that one?
Yeah, sure, you can share it. So this is just, the first slide was showing you the everyday normal community lands, how they look. But then when you implement the right tools for the right environment, you see watersheds being healed, rivers being stable with stable banks and having lots of plant life that actually holds the soil. We usually say rivers don't flow from the rain that came from the sky. Rivers flow from the water that you harvested on your grassland through what we call underground water recharge or springs that then come to a stream and start flowing. That can flow throughout the whole year because it's water that you harvested when it rained. And then in other instances, we also use the same knowledge of the holistic management tools, the animal impact in regenerating crop fields and changing the soil capacity of the crop fields to actually produce food. So these are just the pictures that I'm sharing. Our main tool is the tool of livestock, well managed for the right reasons, being taken to the place and intricately planned, again, managing complexity, because every time you implement a tool on a piece of land that you're managing, there is always a response. And if you do not care to know your land, you then have those undesired results. So these are just some results captured from the Africa Center and the communities close by.
Thank you very much. It looks abundant and restored in a similar way as we saw in the Albaydah video. It's brought back to life again just by retaining water, retaining soil, working with the soil, promoting biodiversity. Thank you, Precious, so far. So these were two different landscapes, totally different. We're now going to look at a third one in Spain. That's where Commonland works together with its local partner, landscape partner, Albaydah, on restoring a vast 1 million hectare Altiplano. The next video is going to show you how Albaydah works on inspiration as part of their restoration program.
La inspiración es ver la magia que se crea cuando se juntan gente que tiene la misma visión, la misma pasión y dicen, esto ya lo había pensado yo, no estoy solo. Hay más gente que está pensando, está queriendo hacer lo mismo. Eso es inspiración porque es el motor del cambio, es lo que genera unidad y lo que genera ganas de cambiar las cosas.
La verdad es que es muy emocionante también de pensar que hay más gente pues, con unas ideas parecidas o con unos proyectos también parecidos y con esas mismas objetivos o ilusiones.
A mí me parece un territorio de las oportunidades. Hablamos de muchos prejuicios de vivir en el campo, es que eso son mentalidades antiguas porque esos problemas realmente ya no están. Pues no es estar solo en un cortijo, es continuamente relacionándote con muchos tipos de personas diferentes, de otros países, con otras mentalidades. Para mí es el sitio perfecto.
Yo veo un territorio próspero, con la gente enraizada, orgullosa y además con gente con muchísima curiosidad para venir a copiar. Que es lo que más nos pone.
Yes. So, all right, this video launches us into a conversation on inspiration and good news with both Judith and Precious joining us. And I wanted to start the conversation, Precious, by asking you, what strikes you if you also see the videos of Albaydah in Spain and of course knowing the African landscape? What resonates, what's new?
Thank you, Erica. So, you know, when I've been watching all these videos, what resonates for me is one, Earth really forgives. And we as humans have such an amazing opportunity to just understand our particular spaces that we have been granted to live and thrive on. And acquiring the right knowledge, implementing the right tools with the right intentions. You know, what I'm discovering is everyone's really now so down to earth and just really absorbed in just making the lives of all living things better. So I'm seeing that land totally responds to that humble space of thinking and learning, being a continuous student of the land that you're managing. So that's what resonates with me across all the videos and the amazing potential that we actually all have at our exposure. So there's no land that is hopeless, especially if it once thrived. It just needs us to tap into that knowledge of what made it thrive and build on the blocks that made it thrive.
Wow, that's already incredible good news to start with.
Yeah.
No, it's actually the same as what Judith said after the Albaydah video. If it can be done in such a difficult landscape, such a rough landscape, complex as the Saudi desert, then it can be done everywhere. And wow, cool. When we were preparing for this session, Judith recommended a book to me, All We Can Save. It's a book in which a number of essays are collected that are written by women on climate change. And rather than focusing on the technical side, the data side of climate change, the book very much focuses on the softer side, bringing in the heart, bringing in the culture, the life, the people. And the topic of this event today is to inspire, to share the story that it's possible, the good news. And for me, if I see that book on climate change, All We Can Save, and restoration, and how that's not only about the practices that you just described, practices like swales or planting, replanting vegetation. It's also very much about that softer component of culture, of bringing people together. For Common Land, we call it inspiration. And Judith, you have been traveling around so many landscapes for your book, but also for your earlier work. What have you found to be the most powerful examples of inspirations you have come across? What gives you hope?
Oh, wow, so many of them. Well, okay, I just watched the video from Spain, and I had the pleasure of visiting the Common Land Project. And when I see that video, what calls to me, it's an invitation. And when I think of inspiration, of all of us being invited into this process of healing the earth, healing our own landscapes, learning from other landscapes, learning what's possible. And the logic of landscapes transcends, just where we are. We can learn from other places. We can, here in Vermont, I can learn from what they've done in Albaydah. And I just think that's this notion of being invited into the process of healing the wounds of our planet, is that we're all needed. And I think at this moment in time, I mean, especially during the pandemic, so many people, certainly in this country, are unemployed and kind of waiting to start their lives, but we're all, everyone feels on hold, and many people don't feel needed. The way that our society is often framed around economic contributions, defined in a particular way, that it's healing in itself to give the message that we are all needed in this process, and that we have agency, and healing our landscapes. We're all creatures of the earth. We evolved in relationship to our surroundings, our environmental surroundings. And I think there's something inherently healing in engaging and being given permission to engage with our surroundings. Just one more thought of that. You said about often we get these technical reports on climate and figures, and often the way that our challenges are talked about, particularly climate change, is that there's almost this notion that technology will save us and that we can address these large challenges without touching anything. And the beauty of the work of ecological restoration is it calls on all of us to touch the earth, to touch each other, touch the plants that will in turn heal the earth, and work with the animals. So anyway, I think the notion of touching and engagement is in itself.
And an invitation for all to join and to act together. That's what I hear you say. How does this sound for you, Precious? Do you recognize this? How important is culture in your programs?
Yeah, so I mean, what Judith has said is right on. Actually, there's no regeneration without the people. There is no conservation without the people. And I think this has been the mistake of really like massive conservation programs. They get driven on just one aspect, leaving out the people that have co-evolved with these systems for the longest of times. Honestly, if you if you do not consider the people of the place and how passionate they are about their land, you're likely to always clash with them. But the problems are ecological. The solutions start off with social understanding of what is the connectivity of the problems we have and ourselves. How have we influenced where we are right now? Not all hope is lost, but the most important thing is to actually dig into the root causes of what caused us to be where we are and where can we learn and get inspiration of the work that has been done. And then we start with our baby steps and start to get going. That's why in holistic management, we really value the social, cultural, economic, and biological regeneration all at once. It goes together.
And can you give an example of that cultural part? I understand it goes together, but can you give an example of how that is expressed?
Okay, I'll give an example. Actually, today I went to a community training. Thankfully, we can now go out with the COVID. We just put on our masks and we can start to engage. So I was engaging with the new community today. 50 incredible livestock owners came in. And so we're just sort of looking back at just our cultural norms and how we related with our wildlife that we saw sort of have created a hate between them now, because of course we understand wildlife as our enemies. They eat our crops and vice versa. But then we were talking about how our totems, our surnames are based on wildlife. So they were our relatives from the start. And then we dug deep into a story how our elders protected an animal called the eland. I would like to apologize to those who do not eat meat, but here our ancestors evolved with hunting, running after the animals and just getting for sustenance of the family. So for example, there was this particular animal, the eland. They say it's tasty. I've never eaten it because of a story that goes with the eland. They say if you eat the eland meat and it doesn't taste nice, if you say that it doesn't taste nice in your heart or out of your mouth, you can grow a goiter. So we started digging into why did they say that, and the elders just say, well, of course I've been finding out, but it's nice to bring out that story. They're like, actually it's one of the nicest meats to eat and taste, whether you make it into a jerky or whatever. But then the challenge was people would then want to eat that only without balancing out the ecosystem. And so they attached a sacredness to it. And so you dread eating it. You're like, what if I don't like it? I don't want to grow a goiter. So that's how we evolved with our culture and norms. And so those stories are so important to bring to the fore, to say, how can we adopt those attitudes of just considering our environment as sacred? And what role can I play as the tiniest part of this space that I've been honored to manage and live in? So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Judith, does it bring a story to mind with you of how we can be inspired by nature?
Well, actually, what story this all called to me was when Precious is talking about how it's all about working with the people, was a story when I went to New Mexico, and just how often our ecological problems are actually people problems, because people may know that there's a better way to manage their land, but they're afraid, let's say, they're afraid of implementing holistic management because the rancher next door doesn't do that, and they're worried about what their neighbors would think. So there are all these different human sides to this. And in New Mexico, I took part in a in an approach to helping people, better manage their land through. Anyways, this place where a community in New Mexico where the land was devastated and people were fighting. There was gunfire, there was sabotage. People were afraid to bring their children to the land. And then our Precious and my colleague, Jeff Goebel, did this workshop, and through having everybody share their aspirations about their lives and what they want for the land in one weekend, they chose to work together rather than fighting each other, and work together. And then as their differences resolved, then the communal effort to restore the land became foremost. And just to say that there are ways for us to deal with our differences as well when we listen to each other. So, you know, oftentimes there's conflicts about land. People want to profit from land in one way, and other people want to have the land be another way. But when you can get together as a community, I know that Precious has used this approach as well and had success with it.
Would you like to add, Precious?
No, except that honestly, what Judith has said is just on point. And the idea of bringing people together is to first have a common vision, not a vision of details or quantified things, but vision of values. These values usually transcend beyond political differences, religious differences, or diet differences. You find that people want the same thing, which is to thrive and things around them thrive. Because even if you have a thriving land and you have no peace amongst each other, it's pointless. You cannot settle there. If you have peace amongst each other and you are poor economically and you have no land to support you, it's also still pointless. So you create a vision of values. That's how I've been working with communities, and we call it a holistic context. And we use the method that Judith just shared, which is called consensus building, where consensus is shown by people really willingly just standing up to the challenge before them and the tasks to then start implementing the regenerative actions.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that, I noticed in the video from Common Land, a word, aspiration, which sounds so much like inspiration, and to invite people to kind of tap into what they aspire to, and to be able to share that within a group. And key to this, and I know key to the process of the Common Land communities, is listening to each other. So the state of the land often reflects the state of the people who manage that land. So in healing ourselves, we're creating the conditions to heal the land.
Well, thank you. I started by saying Unbreaking the news. I think you both you have an enormous amount of headlines in your vocabulary. It's really lovely to hear what you say. I can also relate to it from the Common Land work. The listening, of course, what Judith brings up, but also the collective visioning, and maybe more important, to move to action together. So before we do that in this session, where we want to move from inspiration to action with everybody who is with us today, I want to ask you both one last thing. What is the good, and then reflecting back on the title of this event, Unbreaking News. It's about the positive news that takes place in the long run, but it's also about unbreaking in the sense that it's time to reconnect and to work with the natural world, for example. So what is the one thing that you hope that people take, one thing as good news that you hope that people take home after we close at 5:30? Judith, would you like to start?
Sure. The understanding that we have tremendous agency. Okay. And that this is not only about landscapes, but that so far in terms of climate change, we have neglected the role of functioning ecosystems, excuse me, in climate regulation. So this is about climate as well. Climate is about land, and land is about climate as well.
Precious, what is your good news? What is your hope for future generations?
My hope for future generations is that we, the people that are here now, the future generations will be very thankful that we once lived. That's my very biggest hope. And the second one that I would like people to take home with is that I think in an effort to really try and bring across the message of regeneration, my understanding as I've been dealing with holistic management is that most of the people really have the best of intentions when they start to say, hey, maybe this is a solution. So I think as much as nature is forgiving, can we also be forgiving to close the gap of between them and us? You know, like, oh, those bad guys and then us. So how can we be intentional about bringing communications that draw others to transition to a space where we realize the amount of work that's ahead of us and the opportunity that we have. So we think from an abundance perspective that we have a great opportunity to actually keep changing the language, keep changing how we think, one person at a time, if that's what it will take.
Awesome. Thank you, Precious. Thank you, Judith. You will stay with us. You will also be in the joining the breakout groups. But for now, let's go back to Peter and Willemijn.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Erika. Thanks so much, Precious and Judith. This was really, really beautiful. And one of the things that really touched me was this notion of listening to one another. And I think that's a beautiful bridge of something that we're going to do now. So if you've been sort of like dozing off and dreaming into these beautiful landscape stories, it's time to get back to your screen and turn on your video, because we're going to all be listening to one another in small groups. Breakout rooms. In a minute or so, you'll be asked, you'll be moved towards a breakout room where you'll find one or two other people. And we'd love to ask you to quickly introduce yourself, keep it short, and then share with one another on what inspires you, which could be something from the stories that we've just heard, could also be something else, what resonates from these stories, and what's new, like what's something that you've heard that touched you where you thought, I haven't really heard that before. Make sure you have time for everyone. So we'll have 12 minutes, so roughly 3 minutes a person. And once everyone has shared, we'll be sending you little time reminders. We'll all come back here and we'll have a chance to hear from you what has come up for you, because we believe there's so many beautiful stories to be told, and that this community of now almost 70 people is also full of stories. So with that, there's not much else to say than have a wonderful time in your breakout rooms. If something goes wrong, if you end up alone in a room, feel free to come back and we'll help sort out where you can go. We'll move you to another room. And please do stay till the end, because once we've all come back, we'll have a closing together and a little surprise. So Nadine, ready to go? Okay, and welcome back, everyone. Wonderful to see so many of your faces. It's really great to know that we are a big group of people sharing, and we'd love to hear from you. So one way of doing that is at the bottom of your screen with the reactions button. There's a little function that says raise hand. So if something came up in your group that you would love to share with us, we would love to hear with you and ask you to unmute. But just to kind of organize that, please do use the raise hand function. So again, that's at the bottom of your screen. Reactions and then raise hand. If you can't find it, you can also use the chat and we'll read through that. So we'd love to hear sort of like what resonated for you, what inspired you, what's something that's new, what's something that's come up for you in your group, maybe a new story, an example of something that touched you. Marjolein, could you unmute yourself?
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for organizing this. I had the pleasure of talking to Carl and Precious in our little group. So I was really happy to meet those people. And what resonated with me is that Precious said that she liked the diversity of people that are working on the restoration project. And that it's not only important, or it's not, you can have land to restore, but if you don't have land and you have access to people, then you can also help restore the land. So that's something that I liked very much.
Beautiful, thank you. That's very nice indeed. Any other stories, examples that have come up? I saw there was a, yeah, Stan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the stream so far. I had the pleasure of talking with Esther and Monique, and we were all three in a situation where we kind of looking for ways or exploring what role or a way we could turn into and also contribute to the movement. And we were all three in the position now, like, okay, it's kind of exciting, but we don't really know yet where we're going. But we were talking a bit about meaning and purpose for this movement. That's also a great motivator. That really is very empowering in this inspirational stories that we've been hearing. And that as long as, even though it's uncertain sometimes to really know what to do, we found that if as long as the intentions are good, it's like it doesn't really matter that much what's going to happen, or the uncertainty is easier to deal with as long as you know, okay, this is such a powerful movement. So yeah, we came to that insight, which I thought was very beautiful.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's really great, Stan. So thanks for sharing that. Let's see if there's any other raised hands. If at this, in the same time you have any questions to our speakers, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll be able to read that and pick those up. So don't feel shy. Anna Mang from Canada.
Hi, everyone. So I had the pleasure of speaking with Judith, and what stuck out to me throughout this whole conversation was the word inclusion or invitation. And for me, it stuck out a lot because it was like we have all these little bubbles of different, I guess, groups of people who either study different things or are experts in different things. And as a student, I've seen this in my university and among my peers and stuff, but having this sort of attitude of inviting people into this collaborative effort, I think that was a really powerful message for me of this is the way that we can build these more integrative solutions, is inviting people in rather than saying let the experts do it or leave it to them or that. So that's what inspired me a lot.
Yeah, beautiful. I really like what you're saying there about invitation and the power of an invitation and asking people to join. Thanks so much, Anna. And then we'd love to hear from Frank.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate you all. One thing, I was with Jim and Carrie from Canada. And one of the challenges we have is to inspire the central banks and the corporations, the ones who are using chemicals in our lands, which are the main, I think, is one of the big things from what Ms. Schwartz has written in her book. How do we get collaboration and assistance from central banks and these companies? That is my biggest challenge. I write them, I call them, but they don't respond.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, bringing the central banks on board, I think, is a very beautiful and important notion. I think this is a movement for everyone from all levels. So Esther's iPhone.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome meeting. I'm really super interested in how you involve all stakeholders and the vision building and I was wondering, it's more a question, like, do you also have experience or like on how to work with younger people that kind of, you know, are in poverty and not like very empowered and actually quite turned away from their environment and their local? Do you have does anyone have experience with bringing them on board?
Yeah, thanks, Esther. I think that's a really relevant question. And there is also some things in the chat already in terms of how we as Common Land do visioning. So if you scroll up, and we can share the links later as well, is an example of how we've used Theory U in the visioning process in Spain back in 2014. And there's other stories as well on our forwardturns.earth platform. So those links will be shared also later before we close. So that's on your first question. And that second question might also be a really interesting one to just note and put towards Judith and Precious later. So I'm just going to park that one for now. And then we'll just hear from Joanna first. Thank you. Hi, Joanna. You're still muted, Joanna. You're just going to have to hit the unmute button. Joanna, we're not able to hear you yet. Sorry.
Okay. Hi.
There we go. Thank you.
I was with Sylvie, who's in the Netherlands, but she's from Colombia, and we made lots of real personal connections. She works with Soil Heroes, an organization that works with farmers to help them bring innovation into their practice and also gives them financial support and options for doing things in a more restorative and regenerative way, which is fantastic. And I'm a feminist hippie, back to the lander, who was an organic farmer and had my babies at home, and helped start the New England Organic Farmers Institute and co-ops and all kinds of things. And I've been spending the last 5 years taking care of my mother, who will be 101 next month. And I haven't been able to do anything but just a little, very small garden. And I was dying to know who's doing what and what's happening out there. And I am so inspired that you guys are all out there doing stuff, and there's so many participants, and I can hardly wait to figure out how to get back. I mean, everybody, and what we convinced each other is that what everybody is doing is important, from people who are working the land to people who are regenerating to people who are doing research and innovation and writing policy for water conservation, and every piece is so important. So I want to just say I appreciate everyone.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And that's also really inspiring me. And I think it's so beautiful how we've moved from the question about children to you coming in as the voice of the elders, of someone who's being at this for maybe your whole life. So thanks so much for bringing that in. And we're very grateful for your trailblazing in this. So before we move that question about bringing in the youth to our speakers, we have space for a few more. So Ivan.
Hi, yeah, it's Ivan. Apologize, I was supposed to be in the group with Joanne there actually, and I've been on a work call, so I was not able to really participate. But I'm really excited to see all of this. It's really awesome what you're all doing, and I'm just curious. I'm sure you've touched on it already, but just what are some good ways to maybe get involved? I work in utility scale solar. I'm a project manager, and I like being part of renewable energy, but it's definitely, there's a lot of absence of thought to how the impact on the land really. Another big passion of mine is urban agriculture. So it's kind of what's leading me towards the avenue of exploring this land restoration. So I'm just curious, in this line of work, are there needs for people in project management? Are there, what's a good avenue to kind of give some of my own resources to get involved or get a start really in this? Any thoughts really?
Shall I offer an answer?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think another colleague who's on this call is, I think she's here, is Diana Donlan, who has an organization called soilcentric.org. And she this organization is all about helping people find an on-ramp to work in regenerative agriculture and ecosystem restoration. And then I see, yeah, so other people are posting other ways, because many of us who have been doing this work for a while are really trying to figure out how to create opportunities for young people. So this is all a work in progress.
Thanks so much, Judith, for stepping in. And maybe I'll take the chance to just bring Precious in as well again. Maybe put that question to you. What are you noticing about bringing young people in and the young people in your community, and what's resonating with them, and how are they stepping into this work?
Thank you so much, Peter. So generally, because of how land has been desertifying, most of the young people have been migrating to the cities and finding alternative jobs. But my work and some other partners, I'll mention one called the Soft Food Alliance here in Zimbabwe. We've started to sort of build programs that are around elevating the importance of being land stewards. So, for example, livestock management involves herders, and most herders are young people. So instead of calling yourself, oh, I failed in life, then I'll just go and herd cattle. We're changing the trajectory of that language to make it really attractive, but more than that, to also have other alternatives of actually generating livelihoods while managing land. I think that's what is important, because that's what causes most of the migration to go out. So yeah, that's in brief. And I would like to just say, I think there's lots of connections for the other guy was looking for, to connect and plug in, the soul-centric. They have lots of places that they can direct you where regeneration is happening, and really simple to access. The Savory Institute. I think there's a lot. There are some maps as well that are being produced to show where the regenerative farms are across the Americas, and some are actually really helpful. And you can find people now to then help from that angle.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Precious. And yeah, on those maps, that was a question that came up in the chat before as well. So there's some links that have been shared in the chat already on various maps. So if you have any other questions like that, or answers to the questions that have been put, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll make sure to export that. We have space for just a little bit more. So if you have either a question or another remark from your group, or sort of curiosity, feel free to just let us know in the chat or with the raised hand function. We'll have space for 1 or 2 more voices before we move to a close.
There are no stupid questions, by the way.
So just allowing some space for you to
sorry, I'm
step into.
interrupting. I cannot find the raise hand function, so I'm just going to say that I want to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you so much for this wonderful inspiration session. It was, again, very good to connect with the community of Common Lands and people working in this field. So I am working with coffee farmers, and one of the biggest challenges we face, picking up from Precious' conversation about regenerative farming. So as kind of in coffee industry, this huge monoculture trend, and then a lot of land degradation because of how bigger farms, monocultures, and like more production. So one of the main difficulties when we try to talk with smaller farmers, especially on moving towards a more diversified farm, is economic benefits, right? So having a monoculture coffee farm, sometimes it's, in the beginning it's more profitable, but eventually when you go for a longer time, diversity farm is definitely more profitable, and not just economically, but over different factors. So from your stories, how you guys have been working in different fields and different case studies, what was your initial discussions? Like, how have you approached this conversation with the farmers, with the communities, on the economic benefits, which are long-term rather than short-term? Like, how have you approached this conversation? Would be very happy to know your experiences.
Is that a question you're asking to one of the speakers?
Yeah, maybe Precious, because she just mentioned the regenerative farming. So if she can, or anyone who's interested.
Okay, can I go ahead, Peter?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that incredible question, which is also an unfortunate question because once farmers have been used to the industrial form of agriculture, the marketing point for the industrial form of agriculture is always the dollar, money. I think in this case, then what I've found useful is to really redefine what wealth is. And how do we access that wealth? And we realize that we stagger the programs or the efforts into short-term benefits, short-term returns, medium-term, and then we have a long-term vision. And so I think now it comes back to us who are helping communities transition to really be creative and learn from others how to have immediate returns that do not have negative results, and then medium term and long term. I think first of all, define what wealth is and where is true wealth. I think right now with the COVID-19, we have an incredible opportunity to actually redefine wealth, that only regenerating soils will eventually produce what will stabilize our global economies.
Thanks so much, Precious. I think that's a really beautiful note to bring us to a close. I hope that's that question's answered. So we have a question to the audience for you before you go home, which is, what are you taking home and how are you going to use this moment of inspiration to move into action? So we'd love to invite you to use the chat to share with us what you're taking with you, and we'll make sure to capture that because we also love to learn from how does inspiration work, and if this session has been an inspiration to you, how is it helping you to move into action, and what are you taking home? So with that, I'll hand over to Willemijn for our final close.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks. I have to express I'm so grateful to see all your faces and see people behind the movement. So thank you all for raising your questions and sharing them with us. So if you would like to meet us again and join our community for more sessions, there are some real cool things coming up. So on April 1st, and it's not an April Fool's joke, we really have an awesome session lined up. And Peter can actually tell a little bit more about that. So Peter, can you update us?
Absolutely. So Gaia is a program from the Presenting Institute, and the Presenting Institute is one of our partners. They've developed Theory U, which we use in landscapes. And Gaia was launched as an impromptu response to the pandemic, as a sense-making tool, global activation for intention and action. And the April 1st session will be on cultivating the soil, so ecosystem change and regenerative agriculture, and we'll be contributing to shape that session. So links will appear in the chat if you want to know more. We'd love to see you again next week.
Thanks, Peter. Super nice. On April 21st, we'll have the so-called Four Returns Mountain Trail Summit, which is basically a virtual online learning journey where we actually will be celebrating and sharing some of our lessons learned on the return of inspiration. What we discussed also today to a large extent. What is the role of inspiration really, and what is the driver, and how does it translate into things you can do in your landscape or in your environment to keep motivations high and start a movement basically. So warm invitation to join us there. If you want to stay connected, we also have a community platform which is called fourreturns.earth. This is where you can find events, tools, stories, other landscapes, other people that you can also connect to. So I really warmly invite you to go there and hope to meet you there. I actually got a comment today from one of the speakers. His name is Jeppe Pruijsen. He's a documentary maker in the Netherlands. He left now, so he's not here now, but I'll convey what he said to me. He said, can you please at the end tell people to capture stories and tell them in images, because he feels like, if we want to stimulate this movement, it's so important to create awareness by capturing stories. So I thought that was a nice message to get across to you. So thank you so much for being here. I think one conclusion for me is that the optimists are the new realists. I mean, we need to be optimistic. We owe it to ourselves. So that I want to thank the speakers as well for conveying that feeling of hope. I'm assuming also we've sat still for a long time, probably in the last year, a lot of online meetings. So I thought maybe to make better use of our bodies, it's actually the greatest instrument we'll ever have, I think. We thought it might be nice to, end this webinar with a bit of dancing. So now I'm going to ask you to actually stand up. So.
And you could switch on gallery view so you can see us all.
Yeah, good one. Shake your legs. Long sit. And let's dance. And I hope to see you again soon.
So, do you want to join the dancing?
I love this song. Thank you for putting the music and for a wonderful session.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, zuhambe nami. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilondoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana. Dawo yami ayikholana, buso wami awukholana. Ilondoloze, zuhambe nami.
Wow, that was amazing. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been really wonderful. Thanks, Willemijn, for suggesting to end with a dance. I think it's just one of the best ways to end an event. So thanks everyone so much for coming, and we can't wait to talk to you again and dance with you again.
You know, yeah, I want to say the United Nations Decade is coming, and if we dance all the way through it, we're going to have so much fun while healing the earth. So, yeah, I hope you have a great evening, morning, night, wherever you are.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.